multiple posts of yours, you have specifically cautioned against directly doing homas, as against propagated by few others, I'm guessing. And can you explain your position on this?
Yeah, I have been clear on this for quite some time. So there is no, whether it's a tantric system or whether it's Vedic system, there is absolutely no scriptural sanction for doing homas without doing japa. In fact, specifically in the tantric system, tantric upasana, shakti upasana, not just tantric, shakti upasana. So the idea was that you do japa, and then you do one-tenth of that japa count, what you complete, you do homa into the fire. One-tenth of that you do into you give tarpana to the deity, just like you give tarpanas to pitras, you give tarpana to the deity, and then you do something known as marjara or abhishekam, depending on the deity, a little bit of differences, and then you feed people, 10 people or something like that. Only then the mantra system works properly. Then why is it designed this way? Because in this manner you will go through each of the chakras and each of them will get activated. Now if you, apart from japa, every other of these processes, whether it's a homa, whether it's tarpana, whether this or that, if you keep overdoing them without any checks and balances, initially it may feel very good, eventually it is going to bring you down. Bring you down means it's going to cause confusions, it is going to cause obstacles in your path. The prime example of this is, till date, I've never found a single person who has violated this basic krama of upasana, or not done japa, for example, and done something else, whatever it may be of the five. These are called the angas, the limbs of mantra sadhana. Mind you, all of them are mantra sadhana. Whether you're doing a homa, the moment you're adding a mantra, adding swaha to the name, it is a mantra sadhana that you are doing in fire. So if you do a mantra sadhana in fire or water or some other tattva, and you keep activating it without balancing it with the other tattvas, initially it is like having steroids. Initially your system will feel amazing. Only later on it is going to cause a significant amount of damage. And the prime reason why I say this is, another reason is that I have not found a single individual who has violated this scheme and taken to any exclusive worship through any of the tattvas apart from japa. Japa is different, and attain to the highest. I mean, so the situation becomes like this, that you are theoretically saying that I want to go to the Himalayas, but you really don't know if you will reach there because your Google map is not showing clearly, because there's nobody who has actually taken your path and reached there. What has happened is people have taken the path through the angas of sadhana, which is all of them, which is japa, 1/10 homa, and this and that you do. This is the process of mantra purushcharan, which is called, or the limbs of mantra sadhana. Through this, people have attained to the highest state. So, which means that this is the path that has worked for people. But that path, leaving everything aside, taking one, say Homa for example, and endlessly doing, there is not one single example that I've seen of anybody till date who has attained to highest state of upasana by only merely doing this. Not one example. Everybody, but japa can do that. Japa is a different thing, because there is a process in japa. What it does is that if you keep doing japa intensely at a certain point, and if you have certain abilities, it takes you to a meditative state, and it can also make you access the Akash Tattva, which cannot be accessed so easily by the other systems of Upasana.
What's the importance of Akash Tattva?
Akash Tattva is what takes you to closer to the deity, let's put it that. Without the Akash Tattva, you will not attain to the higher states. So japa is, that is why japa is so important. But apart from that also, this is the inner significance. Apart from that also, when you're doing mantra upasana, if you're doing japa, you create a form of the deity through japa. And this is something that is experiential, you can see that. And then you add the mantra through each of the tattvas, which is you do a bit of it to the fire. And see, this is how it was beautifully designed. So 1/10 of the count of japa is enough. That amount of invocation of fire is enough, because fire is very aggressive. Fire is a fantastic thing. I mean, using homas is a terrific thing, but only if you do it in the right manner. So adding fire adds shakti to the form that you create through japa. And then using water and finally feeding people is the last step. Why you feed people? Because if there is any mistake that you might have done to any of the processes, by feeding, and not just any person, specific to the mantra you are doing. So if you are doing, you can feed Brahmins, good, Brahmins who follow the acharas and who do their upasana properly, not just Brahmins in name and not doing anything. If you find that kind of Brahmins who are still strictly following their, the regular upasanas that you're supposed to do and the kind of lifestyle that is required, if you feed those people, you will get some blessings out of that feeding. And that blessings is going to counteract any mistake that you might have done in any of the other limbs of sadhana. So japa is fundamental. If you can't do anything, do japa. That is the basic. But if you want to do all the 5 steps, then first is japa, then you go to fire. And then, in fact, in the tantric systems, they won't, in traditional tantric sampradayas, they won't even let you do homa until you reach a certain level of mantra japa, because it eventually becomes counterproductive. That is the accumulated wisdom for centuries of sadhana. So somebody out of the blue coming and claiming that we can reverse that process, and specifically when there's no evidence that that kind of, taking one thing out of context has resulted in something genuine. So that makes it a very suspect thing in my opinion.
We come across many people who actually do homas, especially from, say, the Vedic tradition, for example.
No.
And so that is different, totally different.
No, even then also. So fire itself has various categories of sadhana. So if you're doing a Vedic yajna, which is the larger thing, that is different. The people who participate in Vedic yajna, first of all, it is not a daily occurrence. You don't do a Vedic yajna daily. You may do an Agnihotram daily. Agnihotram is different. So you have to understand what kind of fire you're speaking of. So if you're doing a larger Vedic fire ritual, it requires an engagement for certain period of time, say 5 days, 10 days, 3 days, or whatever it is. And it requires people who are specially qualified. End of the day, that is a thing you or me cannot do that. It is only those who are qualified, because it requires a lot of technical processes, etc. So that is what a Vedic yajna is. It's a larger thing. Not everybody can do that. Let's put that, at this moment in India, I believe not more than 10 to among even the Brahmins also, let's put it that 10% maybe who know the processes how to do that, and they still do it. I read in newspapers sometimes some of the major Vedic yajnas have been performed, etc. That is one thing. Then there is the Agnihotram, which is Agnihotram means daily fire ritual, a little bit of. Here the catch is, for doing Agnihotram, there are specific amount of mantras that you do. It's not like I sit and I do a 10-hour Agnihotram. Aisa nahi hota. Specific time you do, specific amount of mantras you do, specific invocations and ahutis you do. And because you are invoking fire on a regular basis, daily basis, you make fantastic changes in your lifestyle to be able to integrate that kind of power. One of the ideal states, for example, if you're really into Agnihotram, first of all, Agnihotram is something that should be done, if you go by the scriptural sanctions, it is to be done only by A, Brahmins, number 2, those who have learned it properly. Okay. B, the lifestyle changes are more important. I mean, let's for a moment, if you believe that, okay, let's keep the varna, the caste factor aside. Is there any other problem in Agnihotram? Somebody else randomly who's a non-Brahmin does the Agnihotram. Agar ye question aata. Problem yahan pe hai ki it requires a lifestyle change, because fire is very powerful. Lifestyle change to the extent that you are not allowed to eat food that is not cooked either by you or your wife or your mother. You cannot just go out and have ki aaj to restaurant mein jaake khana khate hain. That is not allowed if you really want that system to benefit you. So that is why these things were put in place, so that it's a whole integrated process. You follow that process. If you need that kind of lifestyle, yes, then it is a fantastic thing. But I suppose each one has to ask himself honestly whether they are able to do that. And that is only for Agnihotram. Suppose you change Agnihotram into a Homa. Homa is where you are actually invoking deities. You are giving mantra ahutis of the deities. And if you keep doing it day in and day out, it's the same thing. It's like steroids. Initially, you'll feel fantastic. After a few years, you'll not progress anymore. You'll lead to a whole lot of other confusions in and around you in your life.
Is it harmful, or you're saying
in my opinion,
progress?
In my opinion, from the spiritual perspective, it is harmful. I mean, if you are spending so much time, you might as well do it in the way where people have done it and actually achieved something.
Yeah, so it's blocking further progress. But not.
I myself have done a lot of homas, so I know what I'm talking about. And then I had gone to, when this realization came to me that this process does not work, I actually went to different really accomplished people in different parts of India, both south, north, etc., whom I didn't know, but I went to them, I saw them, etc., and I was convinced that they are people who have attained to something higher, much higher than what I have at that moment. And I asked them the same question, and they gave me exactly the same answer. If you're not doing japa and if you directly keep doing homa, you will never ever progress.
Initially, sister you mentioned, who for 1,000 years at Kamakya. The sister you mentioned.
That was
very similar. Yeah.
Okay. Sort of, but my that's why whenever the one advice I tell people, follow the scriptures follow the scriptures that are followed in your tradition. The more you innovate, the more it is going to cost you someday or the other. Because the scriptures, even if you don't look at it as a divine revelation, that is the best way to look at it. Tantras are revealed by Shiva himself, so that gives it authority above everything else. Well, that's why they are Siddha. You can look at it as the accumulated wisdom of thousands of people for long centuries of upasana. So, I mean, seriously, this is the question, this is the answer which I gave to somebody some days ago. If there was a shortcut method to attaining the same thing, say if I do only homas, then I will attain. Don't you think people centuries ago would have already adopted that? I mean, they were far more committed to upasana than you can be in this age. So, boils down to the point that eventually follow the tradition, and that is your safest bet to actually achieve to some actual spiritual growth.